Another mids watch? Yes, there's actually like another 30 of them, guys. Welcome to the show. Doing the regular thing here, we are going to talk about a great field report that kind of dives into covert contracts. And as much as guys say they know what a covert contract is and that they've handled all their covert contracts, I'm here to tell you you haven't. If you don't know what a covert contract is, that is where you have an expectation that you do X, the woman you're with does Y, and then you don't talk about it. And then when, because you don't talk about it, she has no idea what's going on in your head, so she kind of nukes it. And then you get resentful for it because they didn't know the deal. So this field report, it's one of the guys, typical. One field report throws in his question, throws his life at your lap and say, hey, internet strangers, what do I do with this? And then they tell him advice. He argues with them the whole time. You give it about a week, he deletes his account, disappears, goes back to his life of quiet misery. It turns out most guys do not want to be unplugged. They don't want to fix their lives. And at the very least, they just want to be told, hey, tell me everything I'm doing is right and this girl's a bitch. So this guy, she's definitely noticed no change in sex life though. And for the past few weeks, she's been making comments about how I'm acting like an asshole. And tonight, she flipped out. I kissed her and I let her know that sex once a month, we were like 3 weeks in right now, not acceptable. She's like, yeah, you've been acting extra arrogant lately and I don't like it. Then he brought up sex frequency again. It took off in a tangent about how all he thinks about when he gets home while she's busy thinking about the kids. And she also brought up learning to play the guitar again. I bought one recently, been learning to play. I only do it once the kids are in bed. I used to read at that time of night, now I play guitar. I'm not trying to justify myself and my behavior, but I'm still having a hard time with that. Now, agree and amplify comes easiest to me when I ask her what's wrong, having a hobby. She started screaming about how she doesn't have time for one. In my defense, she's always encouraged her to get out and meet some other moms, even without the kids. Anyway, the fight ended. She's crying, claiming that I always say she doesn't have things to do for me, and that she will stop and let the house fall apart. I'm trying to stay centered and be like an oak, but I still struggle. Now, I'm not sure what's going to happen now when we sit down for dinner. So this guy, I want you to, I love this part about field reports. So if you listen to that, you guys know there's a concept called DEAR. Defend, excuse, explain, rationalize. The general red pill strategy is stop doing that. It's one of the easiest things you can do to start improving the lack of attraction in your relationships. Now, he said right there, I'm not trying to justify or whatever, and then he starts defending himself. So he literally says he's not deering, but then as he writes what he's doing, he can't help but expose how he's lying to himself. It's fascinating stuff. When you guys start writing down what you're going through, I think, what did Peterson call it? Like the self-authoring. It's the same concept, right? You write things down because your brain kind of fuzzes over the rough spots, but when you write it down, it makes it crystal clear in front of you. So, typical, one of the good guys in here, Jack 10 of Hearts, makes some notes where the guy's talking about his justification stuff. He's like, I've been considering posting something about two seeming contradictions in the Married Red Pill. We talk a lot about don't just talk, act, but then we also talk about nuking covert contracts, which requires plain and overt language. He gives the example of like a wife's like, why are you acting like a dick? And the guy's like, well, so you consider this being a dick? And the wife's like, you stopped helping me with chores, then you wonder why I'm not in the mood for sex. And the husband's like, yeah, you're right, but you weren't in the mood when I helped you anyway. And I only did them because I hoped you were having sex afterwards, and then when it disappointed you when it wouldn't. So all these contracts are silly, so I'm just going to stop. And that's his like example here. Basically laying out in the open the dynamic at play. And I kind of like how he ends it too. He's like, then the husband's like, no, not saying that. I'll do chores when I feel they need to be done, but not right now. Right now I'm playing my guitar. And then the wife is like, yeah, more hamstering, drowned out by the sound of playing like Stairway to Heaven. Which, by the way, a side note on chore play, something to know on chore play is that it doesn't work. Anytime a wife or a girlfriend starts saying, well, maybe if you did X, I would be more comfortable and want to have sex more often. You can guarantee that's not the case. She may think it's the case because they're throwing spaghetti against the wall emotionally, see what sticks. Maybe that is what it is. But then when it turns out it's not it, they make excuses. Never in the history of ever has somebody done a covert contract like chore play and had it work out for them. I'm telling you right now. So generally speaking, what you have to do then, instead of instead of doing the chores on her schedule to her standard, you have to do them on your standard to your schedule. I have a video where I talk about the dynamics of doing it like to her schedule to your timeline, like a grid matrix. And you'll see, and we walk through why the only thing that works then is you just do it to your standard. And that's it. So Jack points out, like, so what you basically did right there was that. And he's like, justifying your behavior. It's also very directly and concretely nuking a covert contract, which I think is more important in your case. Notice this too. A lot of guys, like I always shit on guys who are like, yeah, what do I do with this? Am I doing this right? It is the best first impression I can make. Here's the thing. Yes, talking and trying to negotiate this stuff is generally seen as a bad idea, but then so is defending, excusing, explaining, rationalizing. In this case, he has to make a choice because they're directly in contradiction. If he keeps his mouth shut, then he's enforcing the covert, he's got that covert contract. But he opens his mouth, he's negotiating his ladder. What do you do? Well, you pick which one do you want to deal with. Sex is basically out of the equation at this point anyway. And he goes, look, this whole thing is common with women and young kids. They've fallen into that martyrdom of motherhood and sacrifice way too much of themselves, physically and emotionally, for the family. So they do this expecting some appreciation, and they get resentful when the appreciation is not given. Pause on this one, because I want you guys to realize this. We talk about guys and their covert contracts. We talk about the need to be more attractive and be less unattractive. And it's not that guys are 100% the problem. There is a lot of examples, and I know I don't harp on them much because, frankly, do we need another wham ain't shit video on the internet right now? Because I think it's pretty much a saturated market. But in this case, brand new moms have their own covert contract. I'm a good mother. I am going to do everything and anything and sacrifice for these children, and then my family will love me and worship me, and nobody will bother me, and the husband will do the chores, and the kids will never cry, and that never works out. And then women get resentful, and that's when the nagging starts. And what you've just watched is the birth of Karen. All because, and the best part is that, like, hey, why don't you read this book we got from Rollo Tomassi? It might help you out on it. But again, women won't self-improve in the same way. I've seen very few examples of it. Generally speaking, women don't change unless they have to. And because guys are thirsty, they almost never have to. So this is kind of a situation where he has to sort it out and then lead her if he wants to keep the relationship, which, again, it's optional. So even when the kids are in bed, I'm guessing her mind is still racing a mile a minute, thinking about whether juggling whatever household shit that needs to get done. She can't unwind. And then there you are, not just quietly sitting there reading, but flagrantly playing classical gas in the next room. Her hamster starts racing since you're violating the covert contract she's established, aka, I martyr myself for the kids, and in return for our disproportionate contribution to my household, my husband should throw himself at my feet in appreciation and make no demands of his own, sexual or otherwise. Clearly, poisonous attitude. You don't likely feel your contributions are disproportionate, and even if you did, you've literally told her, well, if you're upset because you feel like you do more than me, then do less. He's like, I've always encouraged her, get out, meet some other moms, even without the kids. I'm trying to stay centered and Oak-like, but I still struggle. And Jack's like, you see? You told her this, and she still insists on holding you to the covert contract. You tore up your side. I supplicate to the martyrdom, and maybe I'll get a few scraps of sex once a month. And now you have to take her covert contract out of her hands and rip it up. If your wife was loving and pleasant women before you guys had kids, and it's probably not going to be difficult then. So figure out the shit that stresses both of you out and fix it. That's how you be an oak. If you have financial means, that's pretty easy. Cleaning and laundry is a drag? Great. Pay somebody else to do the shit. They'll do a better job than your wife can do anyway. She'll probably hamster about some of this, probably because she takes a misguided sense of pride in her martyrdom and it feels like it's cheating to hire a professional to help things, but that's not your problem. I do like this one because we don't get a lot of these anymore. These are field reports of guys who are like 80% of the way there, but have like one glaring flaw. So it's really neat at like focusing in on a specific thing. And in this case, it's a mixture of a concept called the scoreboard, which I talked before. Like, so when she's doing her covert contract, she's a martyr. She does all the mom stuff. You need to worship her and do everything for her because she's just so great. That's her putting points up on the scoreboard. I know I've talked about it before, so here's a good concrete example for you. She's putting up numbers. Nothing he does any better. I don't get it. I do the dishes, still no sex. I do this, still no sex. I worship her, still no sex. I let her gain weight, I don't say anything about it, still have sex. I encourage her to go meet friends, so maybe she can stop playing this scoreboard game for a bit, still putting numbers on the scoreboard. How do I beat this? And in this case, he's like, well, what's more important? And in this case, it's like beating the covert contract, right? So he's like, you know what? I'm going to do this thing where it's basically negotiating desire, letting my needs be known. It's not going to get him anywhere. Like, she's not going to, oh, well, why didn't you say so? I didn't know you wanted a blowjob. Let me get to work. Not going to happen. And you kind of know that. But at the same time, when you're honest about breaking apart that covert contract, look, the reason I placated your neurotic bullshit and your martyrdom complex was because I figured if you were comfortable enough, we'd have more sex. Clearly, that's not the case. So instead of enabling this bullshit, I'm going to stop. And you're going to stop before you burn out. And that's that part he missed where he's like literally commanding respect from her, setting her up. She has this idea that she needs to be the perfect mom in her head. That's a feeling you can't get rid of. It's natural. It's like telling a guy who wants to be an alpha male. Of course they do. Who doesn't want to be an alpha male? I'd love a Lamborghini and a pair of aviator shades and a cigar. But yeah, so just you fill that void. You want to be a great mother? Great. Go hang out with the moms. Go bring your moms over there. Show how good behaved your kids are. Maybe you have some money and you're like, yeah, you know what? I'll get a maid to come in once or twice a week, so you don't have to do that. Take some time off. She'll bitch about how that's me I should be a better mother than this. But you're like, and you just sometimes lay it out. It's like, nobody's this good of a mom. I don't care what your fucking Facebook friends say. If you got good examples in the past of like friends that are having bullshit marriages, bring that stuff up. A lot of times I do love it. And this is like an old pickup thing. It's called like Us Versus the World, where you build like a world and you put the girl that you're hitting on in there and you guys do it, like people watching, like, oh, look at that couple. What do you think they're talking about? How long they've been together? And then you guys have your own little like inner language, kind of like the He-Man Woman Haters Club here, how we all talk about hypergamy and shit, right? So it builds that. And then you can do that as a relationship. Dude, I do that myself. I know, like, I love all my friends, but every one of them always, like, we all have our own little dysfunctions that the other relationships probably don't like and don't work for them. Whenever it happens, I just bring it up. Girl gets mad when we're cooking dinner. I bring up the story about, hey, remember when Matt made that spaghetti for his ex-wife and she threw it against the wall? It's like, let's not be that couple. And so you kind of attach to, like, it's almost like a positive form of shaming. But again, the only way to get there is you have to be confident enough about your abilities, confident enough about what you want, confident that you've broken all your covert contracts, and completely outcome independent. Like, yeah, there's a chance your wife could completely fly off the handle, divorce you after all this. I just can't deal with this shit. But at that point, you're like, you know what? I'm not going to be the guy with once a month starfish sex with a wife who nags for the other 29 days every month. So if that happens, so be it. Cards fall where they may. I'm going to live the way I want to live. If she's on board with it, great. If not, no. And it sucks how you have to get there by being so overt and unattractive, but sometimes you got to crawl through muck. Anyways, enjoy this one. Have fun. I'll talk to you guys on the next one. Cheers.